Welcome to the Consciousness Anywhere and Everywhere podcast. I am Shannon O'Hara, and I invite you to a completely new world of possibilities. Hello, beautiful seekers. Welcome forward to the second Talk to the Entities specialty focused podcast on the Consciousness Anywhere podcast. Today's focus is going to be on a slightly controversial, but essentially critical target and topic, which is addiction and entities. If you are open-minded and looking for another possibility to add to the way to handle, to heal, to deal with, to change, to transform some of the toughest areas of our lives, I invite you to include the possibility of entities as a reality and something that can and does impact our lives in dynamic and sometimes mysterious ways. Talk to the Entities is a consciousness-based curriculum that I created over the last 2 decades, designed to empower, educate, clear misinformation, and give more connection to the ways in which entities and the reality of the spirit world can and does impact all areas of our lives. And that's where the Talk to the Entities specialties come into play. We are doing a spotlight or focused campaign for each of the Talk to the Entities specialties over the next 12 months. This is the second month of focus. If you missed the first month, it was focused on children and entities, how to empower and work with our children around spirit education and empowering ourselves if we were not empowered children around entity awareness. This month is addiction and entities. If you are listening to this and have ever known anybody who has struggled with addiction, or you are somebody who has struggled with addiction, we know how deeply this topic cuts and how devastating the area of addiction and the reality of addiction can be for us personally and to those that we care for. I was raised in a very progressive, very new world and very mixed family. My mother is of 100% Irish descent, and my biological father is a mix of Eastern European Jewish descent. But I have been exposed firsthand to the disease of addiction, substance addiction. Both of my brothers have suffered from and struggled with and subjected others to very real substance abuse, alcohol, drug, and cigarette. My biological father was a substance abuser for the entirety of my life. And all of my cousins on my maternal side, with the exception of one male cousin, have struggled with substance abuse, been arrested for vehicular manslaughter while under the influence, and have been in and out of drug and alcohol rehabilitation centers for the entirety of their adolescent and adult lives. So I have very direct experience with people, primarily men in my case, who have struggled with, suffered from, and subjected others to extreme suffering through substance abuse. I have been an entity aware and sensitive person the entirety of my life, and I have had a first row seat to the kind of psychic and psychological impact that substances can have. If you have ever been out drinking with friends and literally watched somebody's face change or voice change or personality change the more they drank or when they used drugs, you want to be aware of, and you could ask, is this actually me seeing other entities coming through this person? One of the major impacts that very few people understand, largely due to the complete unwillingness to Western European descent societies to acknowledge the existence and relevance of entities, is that when entities are showing up and impacting things, there is a complete inability to handle it due to the denial of its existence. There are other cultures and societies of people on Earth who do acknowledge the existence of entities, albeit not always done from a particularly practical or helpful way. So when you are dealing with addiction, one of the crucial and primary things that we need to begin to understand is that drugs and alcohol do open up your psychic environment to entities that do desire unconsciousness and anti-consciousness. For the choice to drink to unconsciousness or use a substance that alters your perception of reality, and I'm going to get more specific about this because I know this is a controversial topic. The choice to drink alcohol to the point where you are no longer present, or the choice to use what would be classified or considered a drug, pharmaceutical or recreational, that alters your perception of reality, you have to look at where that choice to utilize that substance is coming from. Is the choice to drink alcohol to the degree of checkout, right? One glass of alcohol has one kind of impact. How much quantity of alcohol can you drink before you become unpresent? For each of us, that's different, of course. If you have firsthand experience, I'm using alcohol as an example because I think that's a more ubiquitous and well-known phenomenon that people can personally relate to. Although at the time of the recording of this podcast, we are experiencing and living in what I would call an unprecedented drug use culture. We have more access to drugs, pharmaceutically based drugs that are designed to alter our perception of reality, alter our feelings, alter our chemical and psychic experiences on an unprecedented level. People are crossing over or stepping out of their bodies on more drugs than ever in human history due to the widespread use of pharmaceuticals, both in a helpful way, but also in a hindering way. So when you drink to the point where you're no longer present, what is it that you think is occurring in that process? When somebody drinks to the degree that they are no longer present, what is their intention in making that choice? Do you drink to become more conscious? Or is alcohol used as a vehicle to not have to be more conscious and not be more aware? So when you choose to use substances that can affect your presence, are you making a choice for more consciousness, or are you making a choice for unconsciousness? And when you are utilizing substances to be less conscious, to be less present, that choice lends itself to opening you up to those kinds of entities and energies that want to influence consciousness through unconsciousness, that are disempowering, that will take over, that will gaslight you into being less present. And I know that this conversation can be triggering for some people, like super weird for other people. And if you are not into weird, if you need to follow a normal path of reality and letting in this conversation about entities just is way too far for you, don't listen to this. Like, I don't need you to get this. This is for the people who have had an inkling that they're dealing with entities and have absolutely no clue how to tackle that phenomenon. So when you use a substance and you are no longer present due to that substance, that's when you open yourself up to and simultaneously invite the kind of entities that will not empower you. Now, when we're talking about entities, it's easy to fall into past superstitions or narrow-minded thinking that you might have been taught or learned in your family or community, or even something you learned from a movie. And I invite you to open your awareness to the reality that when we're talking about entities, we're actually dealing with a huge variation of beings. Are all people the same? The same rule goes for entities. Are all entities the same? Absolutely not. Are some people empowering, kind, intelligent, benevolent, and gifting? Yes. Are some people cruel, disempowering, unconscious, violent, mean? Yes. This goes for entities too. So when you're dealing with the kind of entities that are involved in addiction and drugs and alcohol, you have to look at what kind of entities you're dealing with. The kind of entities that like to be around unconsciousness and anti-consciousness, who even might seek to trigger you into unconsciousness just so simply that they can control for whatever agenda they're controlling for. And if you just take the whole entity thing out of this conversation, how many of you guys have experienced, witnessed, or known people who functioned like that? So this phenomenon translates into the spirit world as well. And if you are looking for a lighter, brighter, happier conversation about entities, trust me, they do exist and they are coming down the track in other Talk to the Entities specialty highlights like nature spirits. And there are such beautiful conversations, realities, and gifts that the spirit world can be for us. And when you're really including awareness of everything and judging nothing, one can see how there is a broad and wide spectrum of entities, just like the biological, bacterial, fungal, and micro worlds, the botanical world, the animal kingdom. There is a broad and wide spectrum of diversity. Some animals will kill you. Some animals will feed you. Some animals will be your best friends. Some entities will kill you. Some entities will nourish you. And some entities will be your best friends. Have you ever wanted to know if your house is haunted and how to clear it? Or how to help your children when they say that there's a monster under their bed? Get free and unlock your own confidence to communicate and receive from your deceased loved ones. Check out the Talk to the Entity shop for all of this and so much more at talktotheentities.com/shop. I posit in the addiction and entities conversation that some people who are dealing with addictive tendencies or are dealing with addiction to whatever degree they are might be aware of entities and or being impacted by entities that they need to be aware of if they want to actually have another choice. One of the things that my father taught me, and he has taught me a lot about entities, is my stepfather taught me. I have two fathers. one of the things that my stepfather taught me about entities is that some people, when they cross over, when their bodies die, when the being leaves the body, if they were, like, for example, a heavy drinker or an alcoholic in their lifetime, when they step out of their body, they might not even be aware that their body has died. This is a bizarre phenomenon that I have run into multiple times where entities don't even realize their body died. That is due to unconsciousness. They're not aware due to potentially a lifetime of substance abuse, and alcohol makes you unconscious, and or dying, i.e. their body dying, while on drugs or checked out in some way due to substances. I feel like I don't need to keep explaining that because we all know how drugs are used to shut off awareness, and so is alcohol. So now, and I feel like I'm like the older sister giving you the bad news. Like, all the people who actually enjoy drinking or have fun with drugs, like, that is a thing. And I am not negating that at all. And I'm actually not, this conversation is not to create judgment or criticism of drugs or alcohol at all. This is a conversation to educate and empower those who are entity curious, are entity sensitive, and are looking for different ways of handling the very real impact and phenomenon of entities that shows up in our lives. Please note that all of these Talk to the Entity specialties are actually classes that I have facilitated previously that exist in the Talk to the Entities web shop. talktotheentities.com/shop will get you to way more information, education on these topics. So entities and addiction is first and foremost the information that with substance abuse or substance use is the person utilizing the substance to check out from reality? Is the person actually trying to become more aware through the substances? And to finish the story about if somebody dies when they're unconscious and they might not be aware that their bodies died, they will walk around and attach themselves to somebody's body that feels like their body, i.e. another alcoholic. And so you can have substance users who have multiple entities attached to them without being aware of it. And each of those multiple entities is carrying their own pattern of unconsciousness. And so this person, this being with the body, now becomes this mass or density of multiple unconscious entities. And when someone gets to the point where they do want to make a choice about changing their substance consumption, and they have a bunch, you can name the number of unconscious or anti-conscious entities attached to them who are constantly sending the signal of have a drink, smoke more, eat more, use that drug more. You can see how that becomes very difficult to make a clear choice. So how do you handle this phenomenon if it is in fact occurring? The first way is to recognize, is this entities? There has to be an ignition of cognition of the potential possibility that entities are part of this equation. Number one question, is this entities? Am I dealing with entities? Now, one of the things you have to realize is that you do know. Actually, everybody knows. And when you ask the question, is this entities? The first thing that comes up for you is doubt or not knowing. That might be a conditioned response. That might be a way of you avoiding your knowing. That might also just be due to literally never asking the question before and not developing your own knowing or sensitivity to energy. So when you ask, is this an entity? If you get a yes, awesome. If you get a no, then it's not entities. However, if you get a yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, that's entities. Because you're hearing multiple entities responding, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. That also means yes. So once you know if you're dealing with entities, and of course, are there other ways to know you're dealing with entities? Usually when somebody's personality completely changes, that's because there's a different entity there. When somebody's face or voice completely changes, that is because there is another entity there. This does not need to be a place to freak out about. This needs to be an area of practical information. Oh, okay, we're dealing with entities. Fact. Not, oh, okay, we're dealing with entities. Significant freak out. I mean, you can freak out if you want. The way I am talking about it, though, however, is a real paradigm shift of if we lived in a totally conscious society, what kind of conversations would we be having about entities? How would we deal with entities? Would entities be included in a totally conscious society? And if so, what kind of impact would those entities have on all of our lives, on society? Because newsflash, entities are impacting us. And we can also impact them. And this is an exciting possibility rather than a scary possibility. The only thing that you fear is your own power. There is nothing that you cannot handle. You might be missing information. So when you're dealing with an entity, number one, you have to actually acknowledge you're dealing with an entity. Then when you're dealing with somebody with substance abuse or who is an addict, quote unquote, from my point of view, it would be so fascinating and interesting if Alcoholics Anonymous actually included practical and effective tools for dealing with entities. I also fantasize of a world where people who are admitted to psychological institutions for hearing voices or having multiple personalities are not medicated, rather educated how to work with entities in a harmonious and peaceful way. And this is 100 trillion% possible. I have experienced it with multiple people, clients, and myself over the years. If we lived in a totally conscious society where particular behaviors, beliefs, energies, and ideas weren't immediately rejected and suppressed, I wonder what would be possible. If consciousness led the charge, would we devolve into a nightmarish mess of suppression, violence, conflict, and insanity? If we lived in totally conscious societies, what would be possible if we trusted energy, listened to our own knowing, and included all energy, information, and awareness without judgment? So when you're dealing with substance use or abuse, when you're dealing with addiction, one of the questions you can ask is, are there any entities involved in this behavior for me? One of the really effective questions that you can ask is, who wants to drink? Who wants to smoke? Who wants to eat? Who am I eating for? Who am I smoking for? Who am I drinking for? That question starts to open the door to, you named it, awareness. Are there entities who are influencing my biology? Now, this can happen for a myriad of reasons, most of which I don't even really think are that relevant to talk about. What I believe is relevant in this conversation is simply the acknowledgement of the phenomenon of awareness of entities. And if you are aware of entities without acknowledging that you're that you're aware of entities, this is where there can start to become very negative outcomes. For entity awareness is not something to trivialize or to disregard, for it doesn't just disappear. Awareness doesn't just disappear. And just pretending like entities don't exist or repressing or suppressing your perception of entities due to why ever you're choosing to do that, does it work? And recognizing that the first step of awareness is a transformational choice. That when you become aware of entities, if you're not automatically now just subject to this avalanche of negative perception, you are actually choosing to become an active participant in the patterns, the blueprint, the possibility of the way reality shows up. The choice of awareness of entities is a vote for you, a vote for the world of awareness that you are creating through the choice to be aware. And what if awareness was a strongness, not a wrongness? And what if learning how to identify entities, deal with them, and when I say deal with them, that's huge. There's literally classes, days of classes dedicated to teaching people how to actually deal with entities, because it's not just one way. There are many ways that effectively simply work. So when you are aware of entities, you can deal with them in such life-impacting ways that make such a huge difference that, frankly, nothing except for actually dealing with the entities via clearing, communicating, and choosing can create. So when you're dealing with addiction, if you add the information about entities to the equation, what would be possible? And this is unfortunately too unexplored of an area and a very charged area for you're dealing with a topic that's so socially unacceptable. And what would it take for the conversation around the spirit world, around entities, to become a conversation that gets to be had around the dinner table, a reality that gets to be explored by those who are capable of exploring it, and something that no longer needs to be feared? For working with, being aware of entities is a peaceful art form, not a crazy, significant need to be judged and persecuted. And what would it take for those who know to trust that they know, and to not need to convince, explain, prove, or justify to those who refuse to know, who will force and enforce their judgment? What would it take for those who do know to not make what they know second to those who would force and enforce judgment as the ruling authority of reality? If the area of addiction and entities is something that you think might be interesting to you, or you know you need more information about, the original addiction and entities class that I facilitated will be linked below. You will also be able to come on live or listen afterwards to a roundtable discussion between me and two other Talk to the Entities facilitators who cured themselves of severe drug addiction and substance abuse through the use of the Talk to the Entities tools. That will be coming in the middle of April. And if you're listening to this far down the track, that roundtable conversation with myself, Angelique Bernard, and Monish Maharat will be live for your viewing pleasure on the Talk to the Entities YouTube or Facebook channel. We invite you to a completely different world of possibility. And if all beings were included and none were judged, what would that world be like? Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to make consciousness easy to find and choose. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes and share this with somebody who you know who might be looking for more consciousness in their life. You can visit me on shannon-o'hara.com or talktotheentities.com. And to learn more about the amazing tools of Access Consciousness, you can visit accessconsciousness.com and be sure to subscribe to the podcast.